Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Nick Does Tech Stuff. I am Nick, I do tech stuff, and this is the Compaq Presario 4824. And now I'm going to introduce you to something else. This is a 4824. And so is this. Why do I have two of them? Because I have issues. And also because, remember, a computer that is worth $100, because there's tons of them out there, is fine. But when you own all of them, you can control the market. I will have all of the Compaq Presario 4800s and I will control the entire market, and then I will sell them for $1 billion, just like the McLaren F1. I actually got this computer because I found it on eBay, and this computer, while in good shape, has a little bit of a yellow top, and unfortunately, due to a amateur retro brighting incident, the top on this computer, in fact, is a little weird. It's a little texturized and probably not the best way. I needed another machine to be able to get stuff from. I am gonna try and retro bright this, although some of them are more sensitive than others. I will give you a link to, I think it's 8-Bit Guy, who did a really good thing on retro brighting, which is literally a process of mixing chemicals together so that you can actually lighten the plastic on these, because they turn yellow over time because of the fire retardant that they put in the plastics. It's called bromine. So that you can basically make these computers look like new. I, however, did not do it right on the lid of this computer, so it looks kind of poop. This one happened to come up. Of course, it was listed as a retro gaming computer. While a powerful computer at the time, the 4824 was meant to be a multimedia computer that could do games, but it was never meant to be a specifically built gaming computer. So without further ado, we're gonna unpack this thing. I opened it up just to make sure it wasn't damaged, but we're now gonna unpack it and see how it looks compared to this guy, do a live startup and test on it after I go over some specs and info after we unbox it. So come along with me while we unbox the second 4824. Okay, so this one's metals are a little rougher in back, but the plastics look a little wider in front. So here we go. One fluid movement. There was one, and then there was two. So now you will see I've got two Compaq Presario 4824s, this one being my original, this one being the new guy. This one is a little dirtier than this one. Obviously, you can see a little bit of a color difference on them. I'm looking in the lens, which I shouldn't do. This is a little yellower than this, so that's great. Looks like we've got some cleaning to do. Stay tuned for a little cleaning ASMR video of this computer. But since we've got it here and it's actually got an original sealed Compaq seal on the interior, it probably has the original spec. So let me put this guy away so it's no longer cramming up my beautiful mug on the screen here, and we'll go over some specs. Through the magic of editing, we are now back with just one Compaq Presario 4824. The Compaq Presario 4824 was part of the Presario 4800 series. I did a review, kind of an overview of the 4880 on my previous video. I also included in that video this machine because I was so impressed how they had black spaceship towers instead of beige spaceship towers. This is a beige spaceship tower. These were actually also lower spec, so it's kind of funny the lower spec was beige, whereas back then everything was beige, so no matter what color you got, it was basically a spec that was low in beige. But the black ones, however, were the highest of high models, but these are all part of the same 4800 series models, and oddly enough, the 4660 behind me, they didn't have a high spec model for that in black, although that would have been really cool, to be honest. This model happens to be a 233 megahertz Intel Pentium 2 with MMX technology, can't forget that. Always made that wonderful little Intel noise that you'll hear here. And it also came spec'd out pretty decently for the time. Keep in mind, this was the low end of the high end systems. It was again, 233 megahertz Pentium 2, 32 megabytes of RAM. Yes, I said 32 megabytes of RAM. I know that's unbelievable to even think that RAM has that right now. My computer that I have in my main office and my editing rig has 128 gigabytes of RAM. So it's a little over 128,000 megabytes of RAM. The computer also has a 6.5 gigabyte hard drive, which is a wide Quantum Bigfoot TX. Unless somebody has opened this and replaced it, you'll finally be able to see what one of those big beasts looks like. The computer also came with a slot loading instead of a tray loading CD-ROM drive instead of a DVD drive, so little lower spec on that, wasn't really meant for movies. Still came with RCA jacks on the front of the machine in order to be able to plug in a video camera or VCR so you could record your own video and movies onto the computer at the time. Also still came with an ATI Rage Pro 2 graphics card with either 4 or 2 megabytes of RAM. I actually can't remember the spec on this, so we're gonna find out when we open it. And this computer was slotted in as the entry level of the high end, instead of the high end of the high end like the 4880 was. I'm sure that now you know the specs and you already know what the machine looks like. It's a beautiful rocket ship. These computers are my favorite thing, that they look like rocket ships. It's got the little feet where the actual rockety bits come from, and then the thing that aims up towards the atmosphere in the top. I will give you a quick overview of this if you haven't watched the Presario 4880. The 4824 came with a activity center along the top here. The buttons on the front of this machine were a rocket ship, which brought you to Compaq's website, and globe, which had you go to basically Internet Explorer and land on the MSN homepage or whatever homepage you were on. Had a phone button so that you could actually use Compaq's phone dialing suite. You could actually do video calling on this way back then if you connected a video camera over USB. You also had to have a wired mic and a 56K modem. Yes, that was a thing at some time. The last one is the phone book, so you could have quick reference to the phone book. On the other side, you have the audio suite, so that would be the play, pause, forward, and back buttons, so then you could basically use this like a CD player, so you could actually leave the computer with the screensaver on and have sound going through your speakers, and then if you wanted to change the title on your CD, you just hit the forward or back button, play, pause, or of course stop. And then the big middle button is actually the power button that has a sun and a moon. Very, very handy, very convenient. A lot of computers back then, you actually had to reach around the back and flip a power switch in order to turn them on, or they had a very big mechanical clunky switch. Some people really love those. I actually like the stop button here. They really don't make that much of a noise. The other spot that I just pointed out is that there is a bay door here with a slot loading CD-ROM behind it, and there's a slot here so that the slot loading CD-ROM can pop through, but you'll see there is a CD-ROM drive that of course is slot loading with an eject button, 2 expansion bays, and then all the way up top is your RCA jacks, which let you connect video cameras and VCRs to record your memories on the computer. Below the door that conceals all of the quote-unquote ugly drive bays, you have the 3.5-inch floppy drive, and then from there basically you just have the bottom where there's this curved bowed out from the front. You can't really see it, but it's curved like that. Air intake so that it can suck in air. The Presario 4824 and all the 4800 series also actually have a little plastic foot under here, which I'll actually show you because I think it's a great idea. Plastic foot, which is in fact hollow from the back here to actually suck in air this way and bring it up into the computer so you can constantly provide cooling. Really super cool idea. The front and sides of the machine are nothing to write home about. Both of them are just gray metal with some perforations at the bottom to help intake air. This one obviously has a dent for your hand. The back, which is probably the other part that's semi-interesting. On the back side of the Presario 4824, you will find the 120 watt power supply that gives all of the power to the Intel Pentium 2 processor that you have in here, along with your board and all your various devices. Interestingly enough, I have a 1000 watt in my Alienware gaming desktop. So even though these were the cream of the crop, they didn't require wattage. As you go down the machine, you'll see that there is a red sound port and a blue microphone port. Obviously, these colors have changed over time. Sound is now light green and microphone is now red. Things were pretty much a no man's land and everybody had different colors and specs back in the 90s. So you basically made it whatever standard you wanted to. So Compaq decided that blue and red were their jam. It also has a sound in and sound out, so you could output to an alternate source and also input to an alternate source. So you had those options on your ESS audio. Below that, you have your PS2 ports. PS2 was basically how all keyboards and mice connected before USB was standard on everything. So you had a PS2 keyboard and a PS2 mouse. They were different colors also. The orange and the green actually was kind of semi-standard. They then switched it to like a purple and green. So you always knew which one went in which. There is a little note on the ports which one are which, so then you don't plug them in backwards because they would not work. Below that, you do in fact have USB. These are USB 1 ports, obviously. The Compaq line, actually all the Compaqs I've encountered after the 2nd generation, which This is like the 2.5. It's like a facelift of the second generation that came out. They all have USB, not around the front yet. The next generation after it had that. In fact, if you look there, you'll see the third generation with that little door there. That computer, in fact, has USB on the front of the machine, as well as the gaming port, joystick port on the front. But here, you only got an in back, and in fact, if you bought a 4880 with the matching FX500 or FX700 monitor, all of the buttons on the front of the monitor would actually be driven via USB. You would connect it from a USB-B plug on the back of it to here, so that you could use all your multimedia buttons, and it would also recognize a USB hub on the back, or actually on the back and front of the monitor had available USB, which was really cool back in the day because they were starting to get USB devices that were around. In fact, when I was a kid and I got my first 4860, I believe, I actually had an FX700 monitor, the big 17-inch monitor of that version, and I was able to plug our cable modem into the front of it via USB, because back then they didn't even do it over Ethernet, because while cable was fast, it was faster than 56K, it wasn't overloading a USB 1 circuit. Kind of an interesting thing to think about now that you're, you know, here where everybody has Ethernet and Wi-Fi and everything goes at either a gigabit plus, and we weren't even breaching, I think it's, I'm gonna put the spec here. Once you go past USB 1, you'll see you have your serial port, which was a standard port for interfacing with lots of different devices, kind of a legacy port. You'll have your printer port, which obviously was really huge, and I have no idea why it was that big.
That's what she said.
Obviously, these went the way of the dodo when USB kind of took over. Even way back then, a lot of printers had a printer parallel port like this, and also were able to do USB. USB was the preferred option. It was much faster and less trouble. And at the bottom, which is kind of a weird place to place it because the computer is at a slight angle, but this is the VGA cord. So, or VGA port, not cord. VGA cord plugs into this port. So that is where your video came from. And then the last guy over here is your joystick port. So that would have been where you plug in a joystick or gaming port thing, or they called it MIDI devices, MIDI devices. Never encountered one of MIDI devices, but I'm sure they existed and people used it, but I'm assuming audio and gaming related port. Over here, of course, last we have the PCI and ISA slots. So that was how you connected add-in cards. Obviously this computer has a, what is that? That is Ethernet. This computer must have been opened at some point in time because they did not come standard with an Ethernet card. They came standard with a blazing fast, truly high-tech 56K phone modem, which you plugged in your phone 9 and heard that whole weird AOL dial-up noise like this. And that basically got you on with America Online, which is pretty much the only provider you really had back then, unless you did have cable. So maybe this was updated. This sticker looks original, so I was assuming that this computer hasn't been touched, but we'll see. Now let's go a little more in depth on the inside of it, because I think a lot of people love knowing the specs of all the insides of the machine. Pop her open, doesn't look too bad. With all of that being said on how it looks inside, it must have been cared for fairly decently. It looks like it's got no real dust in it. Let's go ahead and pop out the ISA PCI riser, which can be difficult and a bit terribly firm, if not impossible, apparently. Oh, there we go. This is the PCI ISA riser attachment. So basically everything was conveniently put on this little card with this little tip, and all of your PCI and ISA cards were handily put in there, which makes it a lot easier than having to tinker around with your head like down in the computer trying to find the little screw heads, because you had to unscrew these screws, line up the card that you plugged in, and then go ahead and get everything back in. So very handy feature of the 4824. Also created kind of a wind tunnel, because I don't know if you noticed, there's a break here. Inside here you'll see this is the Intel Pentium 2 processor. That is again 233 megahertz. Below that you'll see the RAM. This is one stick, I'm assuming, of 32 megabyte RAM. Let's actually pop it out and take a look. Let's see. Oh wow, somebody has upgraded this. This is Kingston 133, if that will focus. If not, I'll pop a picture of it that's clear. Kingston 133 megahertz 256 megabyte RAM. So somebody has been in here to upgrade this machine. And unfortunately, to my disappointment, this is the caddy where the hard drive is held, and there is no hard drive in said caddy. So came without a hard drive, I guess that's fine. And with a little bit of magic and prayer, here we go. The unit will come out, Looks like it's got a little cable to hold in your power cord. This is the hard drive caddy. Obviously, it is really wide. If you see the width of a regular hard drive, which is probably about my hand, a lot wider than a regular hard drive. That is because these held Quantum Bigfoot TX hard drives, which were actually the size width of a CD drive, not a normal hard drive, which was 3.5 inches. So they were meant for these big wide hard drives. And I guess if you wanted to use a smaller hard drive, a lot of times they did ship with adapters that made them wider. You would have to do that. The other handy thing that is on the hard drive caddy, basically I'll call it, is for the 4824. It basically used the same board for multiple processors. So on the front here, it's actually got your jumper settings for a 233, 266 and 300 megahertz Pentium 2 processor. I have taken out some of the cabling so things are easier to see here. I obviously already mentioned this is the Intel Pentium 2 slot processor. It literally was on a processing card board that then was covered in this plastic and then connected to this heatsink, and this connected on a slot on the board. These were literally called slot processors, not socket, which everything is now. Below that, obviously, is the 1, 2, 3 RAM slots with a 256 megabyte RAM stick put in, which is obviously new. Originally, they came with 32 megabytes. Moving more towards the front, and this is actually the question that we now have answered. If you look down in the bottom corner here, this is where the ATI 3D Rage Pro AGP graphics were. However, this one does not have the little riser board that the later 4860 and 4880s had, meaning this had 2 megabytes of VRAM instead of 4, or it's 4 instead of 8. On top of that, you have the SMC controller, which I believe is part of your north or south bridge. Actually, it may even be for the IDE controller. Above here, you'll see these little guys here. Those are where you plugged in your hard drive using these cables. These are IDE cables to plug in your hard drive and stuff. And then you had the cabling for your floppy drive. So they even actually listed what they said on it. This one says 3.5-inch floppy. This one says system board, so you knew what end to plug it in. And then this one even says drive. Coming in though, however, from the IDE controller, you'll actually see an Intel controller chip. And then above here where your proprietary power went to your motherboard on Compaq, there was one power here. And then in fact, you had two more that plugged in here that were two separate pieces. It wasn't a standard ATX motherboard or case, and people gave Compaq and a lot of manufacturers a lot of crap about this, but everybody was like, oh, Compaqs were crap because they had proprietary power supplies and board plugs. Everybody did that. HP did that, Compaq did that, IBM did that, Packard Bell did that. All of the big manufacturers that you could go into Circuit City or Best Buy and buy a computer at had proprietary connectors, and especially Apple. You've got your ESS audio controller, which of course controlled the sound for the computer itself. And then of course you have some giant capacitors, which thankfully look very clean and clear. Also, you'll note that next to your audio controller, you have the audio in for if you wanted to install a DVD drive, you needed to run an actual cable into the board to carry audio. So there was a little head to do that. Above that, this here is the 3.5-inch floppy drive. You have two empty drive bays for putting CDs, zip drives, whatever you wanted to in here additionally. And then all the way up top, you'll see the slot loading CD drive. And then of course, in all its glory is, believe it or not, a Compaq made power supply. Quite a lot of Compaq made stuff. Obviously, a lot of big brand names. ATI was really big. SMC is still really big. Intel's really big. ESS, I think, has disappeared over time, but we are going to plug this in and back just to see if it will run and turn on. It obviously isn't going to be able to boot because it didn't come with a hard drive, but I want to make sure I got a working computer. I have not tested it yet. I literally just unboxed it and showed it to you guys live, so I want to see how it works. Oop. We have light. We have noises. Hey, that's what we're looking for. She posted, we've got a beautiful red Compaq boat logo, and apparently we're going to count up a RAM. Let's skip that. Saving your changes. Okay, and apparently this computer needs a battery. That means that I just need to get a battery for it. That's a little watch battery guy, so very easy to swap on here. I say that because although you can see the screw refresh rate is absolutely shit, it says it is 8/12/97. So I'm assuming that may have been its manufacturer date, so she's a little old. I'm just excited that the computer powers on and posts since we can't do anything else with it. I would like to say thank you for watching the video. I appreciate anybody who does. If you have anything you'd like to see more on the 4824, please let me know. I want to do more videos on this. I think obviously just like the 4880, I'm gonna do a video on installing a hard drive and installing an operating system on it. I hope you all have a great day. Please like, subscribe, and follow. I also have an Instagram if you feel like following there. I appreciate any comments you have, good, bad, negative. I love positive criticism, honestly, or negative criticism, any post or response. It helps me learn, or it helps you get outrage of internet hate, whatever it is. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and be nice to people. Peace out.